I went hiking alone on a trail I had never walked before because I wanted something new without driving too far. The trailhead was about 2 hours from my place, tucked behind a small mountain town that looked half abandoned even in the middle of the day. A few old houses, a closed gas station, and a single restaurant with boarded windows. That should have been my first warning, but at the time I only thought about how quiet it looked. The trail was listed as moderate, about 9 miles out and back. I figured I could finish it in one long day. I packed food, water, a headlamp, a backup battery, and extra clothes. I didn't rush getting ready. I checked my map twice and saved it offline. I wasn't careless, just confident. The parking area had only one other car. It looked like it had been there a while. Dust settled thick on the hood. No one was around. No sounds except wind pushing through tall grass. I locked my car and started walking just after noon. The first couple of miles were normal. A wide dirt path, clear signs, trees spaced far enough apart that sunlight reached the ground. Birds called from overhead, and the air smelled slightly damp, like recent rain even though the ground was dry. My boots made steady, even noise. Everything felt balanced and calm. About 40 minutes in, the trail narrowed and started climbing gently. The forest closed in. Trees stood closer together, their branches overlapping, blocking most of the sky. The temperature dropped a bit, and the air felt heavier. I pulled my jacket on and kept moving. I noticed something odd about the ground. In certain soft spots, there were footprints that didn't belong to me. At first, I didn't think much of it. This was still a public trail. Someone could have been ahead of me earlier that morning. The prints were boots, not different enough to stand out, but they looked fresh. The edges were clear, not filled in by dirt or leaves. I assumed the other hiker was far ahead, maybe almost done. That thought was comforting. As I went deeper, the trail stopped feeling popular. Fewer signs, less maintenance. Fallen branches lay half cleared, shoved aside but not removed. In one spot, the trail curved around a rock wall and narrowed so much that brush scraped my arms. That's when I first heard movement behind me. It was faint, just a light crunch, like a foot shifting weight on dry leaves. I stopped walking, pretending to adjust my pack. The sound stopped. I stood there for a full minute, heart slightly faster than before. Nothing else moved. I told myself it was an animal. I started walking again. A few seconds later, the sound returned. This happened several times. Every time I stopped, the sound stopped. Every time I walked, it came back. It wasn't constant, just enough to be noticeable. Too steady to ignore. Too slow to be an animal running through brush. I didn't want to turn around. Something about doing that felt like admitting fear, and I didn't want my brain to spiral. I kept my pace steady and focused forward. After another mile, the trail crossed a shallow stream. The water was clear, barely moving. I stepped carefully over smooth stones, then turned slightly to look back as if checking my footing. I saw someone, not clearly, just a shape between trees, taller than me, standing still, dark clothing that blended into the shade. The moment my head turned fully, the shape shifted backward, disappearing behind a tree. My stomach dropped. I stood there longer than necessary, pretending to retie my boot. My hands were shaking, and I had to clench my jaw to keep my teeth from clicking. I listened with everything I had. Nothing. No footsteps. No breathing. No movement. I crossed the stream and continued. Faster now. My thoughts raced, trying to stay logical. Maybe it was another hiker who didn't want to startle me. Maybe it was nothing. But no matter how I tried to calm myself, that image stayed in my mind. Someone standing still, watching, then hiding. The forest grew darker even though it was still early afternoon. Clouds rolled in thick and gray, blocking the sun completely. I checked my watch. I still had plenty of daylight on paper, but the trees made it feel like evening already. The footprints appeared again soon after, always behind mine, matching my pace. I stopped, avoiding the obvious truth. Someone was following me. I didn't run. Running would burn energy and make noise. I walked faster, controlled, scanning ahead for any open area or side trail. The map showed a clearing a mile ahead, where the trail met an old maintenance road that was no longer used. I focused on reaching it. The sounds behind me grew closer. Not faster, just closer. The steps were careful, deliberate. Whoever it was knew exactly how much noise to make to stay noticeable without being obvious. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it filled my ears. I reached the clearing and stepped into open space. The trees pulled back, revealing a wide patch of compacted dirt and dead grass. Tire marks crisscrossed the ground, old but visible. I turned in a slow circle. No one. The silence felt wrong. Not peaceful. Heavy. I didn't stay. I crossed the clearing and followed the maintenance road downhill. It wasn't on the official trail route I had planned, but it led in the general direction of a Forest Service access road. Longer, but safer if it was open. The road was barely a road at all. Just two worn tracks through grass and dirt. Trees pressed in close on both sides. As I walked, I kept checking behind me. I saw nothing, but I felt watched. At one point, I noticed fresh scuff marks in the dirt beside the road, like someone stepping off and back on. My chest tightened, started to get cold. The light faded fast. I pulled my headlamp out, but didn't turn it on yet. I didn't want to announce myself if someone was nearby. I heard movement again, closer than before. Not directly behind now, but to my right, moving parallel. Whoever it was wasn't hiding anymore. They also weren't approaching, just staying with me. Fear settled deep into my body, calm and heavy. I knew then that this wasn't about misunderstanding. This was intentional. I hurried, boots slipping slightly on loose dirt. My breathing grew louder no matter how hard I tried to control it. The road curved and finally opened onto gravel. A real road, wide enough for trucks. I stepped onto it and stopped, chest heaving. I listened. Nothing moved in the trees. I waited a long time, forcing myself not to panic. Minutes passed. Finally, from the corner of my vision, I saw movement at the edge of the forest. The same figure stood half hidden, just watching. They didn't step onto the road. They stayed right where the trees ended. I didn't move. Neither did they. After a long moment, the figure stepped backward and melted into the forest. I walked the road until I reached the main highway where my car was parked. I locked myself inside and sat there, shaking, staring at the dark trees lining the road. I drove away without stopping until I reached the town again. Later that night, I looked up the area online. Buried deep in old forum posts were stories from other solo hikers. Being followed, watched, no attacks, no confrontations, just presence. I never went back to that trail. I still hike, but I choose places with people, with signal, with exits. Some trails aren't dangerous because of animals or terrain. Some are dangerous because someone else decides to walk them the same day you do, and for reasons you'll never understand, they decide not to let you walk alone. I planned that hike as a reset. Nothing dramatic, nothing extreme, just a long loop through a national forest that I hadn't visited before. It was far enough from the city that cell service was spotty at best, but still listed as a maintained trail. I looked at the map the night before, memorized the general shape, and packed more than I needed. Extra food, extra water, spare socks, a headlamp with fresh batteries. I didn't feel reckless. I felt prepared. I pulled into the trailhead parking lot late in the morning. 3 spaces, all empty. The signboard was old and warped. The posted map faded so badly I couldn't read half the text. That should have made me reconsider, but instead I felt a sense of relief. No crowds, no noise, just trees and miles of quiet. The trail started wide and packed down, like it had once been a service road before being let go by the Forest Service. Tall trees lined both sides, blocking wind and sunlight. The air felt still, heavy in a way that made every sound feel louder. I could hear my boots clearly with every step. I could hear my pack shift when I moved my shoulders. For the first hour, everything felt normal. The trail gently climbed, then dipped. Small streams crossed the path, shallow enough to step over on rocks. Birds moved somewhere above me, but never close enough to see. I settled into a rhythm and let my mind wander. That changed when I saw the first piece of trash. It was a crushed plastic bottle, partly hidden under leaves, but not old, not sun-bleached or brittle. Someone had dropped it recently. I looked around, expecting to see other hikers somewhere ahead, but the trail was empty. I kept walking. A little farther on, I noticed something else. The undergrowth beside the trail was bent down in a few spots, like someone had stepped off and stood there. Nothing obvious enough to stop me, but enough to register. Then I heard movement behind me. At first, I thought it was just branches shifting, or my imagination picking up random noise and shaping it into something familiar. Forest sounds can play tricks on you when things get quiet. But the sound repeated, a soft crunch, then another. I stopped walking. The sound stopped too. I waited, holding my breath without realizing it. The forest went completely silent. No wind, no animals, nothing. After a minute, I started walking again. The sound returned almost immediately. It matched my pace, but never exactly. Always a second or two behind. Close enough to hear clearly, far enough to stay hidden. I told myself it had to be an animal. Maybe a deer curious enough to follow, or a person hiking the same trail at the same speed, coincidentally staying out of sight. That explanation calmed me just enough to keep moving. The trail narrowed and the forest closed in. The light dimmed as clouds rolled overhead. I checked my watch. Still plenty of time left in the day, but it already felt late. I noticed footprints in a muddy stretch of trail. Boot prints, fresh, clear. The tread was different from mine, deeper in places, heavier. They were behind my prints. I stopped and turned around, scanning the trail. I saw nothing. The path curved, disappearing into trees. The sound didn't return while I stood there, but the feeling of being watched settled heavily in my chest. I turned back and walked faster. The movement behind me grew louder, no longer trying as hard to stay subtle. Not rushing, but not hiding either. That scared me more than if someone had just come out into the open. I reached a point where the trail split, though one path was barely visible. According to my map, the left fork led back toward the main trailhead. The right went deeper into the loop before eventually connecting back. I hesitated. Turning back meant possibly passing whoever was behind me. Continuing meant more isolation. I chose to continue. The right fork was rougher, less traveled. Fallen branches blocked sections. I had to step carefully over roots and rocks. The sounds behind me followed onto the same path without hesitation. At one point, I slowed and stepped slightly off the trail, pretending to look at my map. I watched the ground ahead of me, waiting. Footsteps appeared. A pair of boots stepped into view from behind a tree, then stopped. I didn't look up. I stayed still, pretending to adjust my pack straps. After a long moment, the boots stepped backward, out of sight. That was when fear truly took over. Not the sudden burst kind, but the kind that settles deep and drains your strength. I moved again, faster now, breathing harder. The trail dropped sharply, then climbed again. My legs burned. Sweat soaked into my shirt despite the cool air. I smelled something strange. Rotting food, maybe, or damp earth mixed with sweat. It grew stronger in certain spots, then faded. The forest felt tighter as I went on, trees growing so close together that I had to brush past them. I heard movement to my left now, not just behind me. Whoever it was had moved off the trail. That meant they were trying to stay unseen. I focused on reaching the end of the loop. According to my map, there was a Forest Service road ahead. A real road, open space. As the light faded further, the temperature dropped quickly. I pulled on an extra layer without stopping. My fingers felt clumsy. My breathing sounded too loud in my ears. I stumbled once and nearly fell. The sound of it echoed. The footsteps behind me closed in immediately, closer than before. I could hear breathing now. Slow, controlled. I ran. Not blindly, but as hard as I could. The forest tore at me. Branches scraped my face and arms. I didn't care. I just ran downhill, trusting the map and my instincts. Eventually, the trees thinned. Gravel appeared under my feet. I burst out onto a wide dirt road and stopped, gasping. I turned and faced the tree line. A figure stood just inside the forest. Tall, still, watching. They didn't move toward me. I backed away slowly, staying in the open. After a long moment, the figure stepped backward and disappeared between the trees. I walked the road until it led back to the parking area. My car sat alone exactly where I left it. I locked the doors the moment I got inside and stayed there for a long time, hands shaking on the steering wheel. Later, I searched for information about that trail. I found scattered reports from solo hikers about being followed, stalked just out of sight. No official warnings, no answers. I still hike, but I never go alone on unknown trails now, because whatever followed me that day didn't want my backpack or my supplies. It wanted my isolation, and it only stopped when the trees ran out. I picked the trail because it didn't stand out. No dramatic photos, no online praise, no long reviews warning people away or drawing crowds. It was just a thin gray line on a map that cut through a large section of state forest. I had been hiking long enough to know that the quiet trails were either boring or honest. I preferred honest. I wanted a full day alone, steady miles, no pressure. I told myself that if anything went wrong, I had enough experience to handle it. I arrived early, just after sunrise. The parking area was small, barely more than a dirt clearing with room for a few cars. Mine was the only one there. A wooden post near the edge of the trees displayed the trail name, faded and splintered, like it hadn't been replaced in years. No map, no warning signs, no emergency information. That should have registered more than it did. At the time, I felt calm, focused, in control. The first hour was easy. The trail was flat and wide, likely an old access road that had been converted long ago. The forest was thick, mostly pine and fir, with dense undergrowth close to the ground. Morning light filtered through the trees in long pale beams. Everything smelled clean and cold. I walked at a comfortable pace, not rushing, not stopping much. I liked settling into that rhythm where your thoughts slow down. Eventually the trail narrowed, the ground softer under my boots. Fallen needles muted my footsteps. The forest grew darker as the canopy thickened. I noticed how quiet it was. Not peaceful quiet, just empty. No birds, no insects, no distant sounds. I'm used to quiet on trails, but this felt different, like something pressing down. I kept walking. After another mile, I noticed something small that didn't sit right. A boot print on the edge of the trail where the dirt was damp. It was clear and sharp, fresh. I stopped and looked around, expecting to see someone ahead or behind me. There was no one. I figured another hiker must have passed earlier that morning. That explanation worked well enough, so I moved on. But as the trail curved and dipped, I started seeing more prints. Always one set, always just behind mine. I told myself they could belong to the same person who made the first one. Still not a problem. Still normal. Then I heard something. A single crunch behind me. I stopped walking. The sound stopped too. I waited, listening, my breathing slow and controlled. The forest stayed silent. After nearly a minute, I stepped forward again. The sound came back. It wasn't loud. It wasn't rushed. It was careful, like whoever or whatever made it was trying not to be noticed, but also didn't care if I knew I wasn't alone. That feeling crept in slowly, heavy and cold in my chest. I didn't turn around right away. I needed more information before letting my fear run away from logic. I walked another 100 yards and stopped again. Same thing. Stop, silence. Walk, footsteps. Someone was behind me. I finally turned around, scanning the trail. I saw nothing, just trees, shadows, uneven ground, and the quiet stretch of path behind me. My heart beat a little faster, but I forced myself to breathe. I kept going. The terrain slowly changed. The trail climbed, becoming rocky in places. Roots crossed the ground like traps. I slowed down, watching my footing. Every time I focused forward, the footsteps stayed behind me. When I stopped, they stopped. The distance never changed much. Close enough that I could hear them, far enough that I couldn't see anyone when I looked back. By late morning, the sky had clouded over completely. The light dimmed, and the forest took on a gray tone that made depth harder to judge. I checked my map. According to it, The trail crossed several abandoned spur paths before reaching a ridge. None of them were marked clearly. I felt uneasy about that, but I wasn't ready to turn back yet. When I reached the first unmarked spur, I stopped. I pretended to check my map longer than necessary while listening carefully. Nothing. I took the spur, stepping off the main trail and into thicker brush. I waited several seconds after turning before continuing, trying to see if the person behind me would follow. Footsteps crunching through leaves came seconds later. That confirmed it. Whoever was behind me wasn't just heading the same direction. They were tracking me. I didn't panic. Not yet. Panic makes mistakes. I weighed my options. Turning around and heading back would mean passing whoever it was. That felt dangerous. Continuing deeper wasn't ideal, but at least it gave me space and time to think. The spur narrowed quickly, barely visible in places. Branches clawed at my clothes. My breathing grew louder, and I had to slow myself down. I stepped carefully, trying not to slip or break an ankle. The forest smelled damp now, heavier than before, mixed with something sour I couldn't place. At one point, I tripped and caught myself on a tree. The sound echoed too loudly in the stillness. A moment later, the footsteps closed the distance slightly. Not enough to see the person, but enough that I knew they'd noticed. Fear finally set in fully then. Not sharp panic, but a deep, steady dread. Whoever was following me was patient. They weren't rushing me. They weren't calling out. They were just there. The spur path ended in a small clearing, overgrown but open enough to see around. Old fire rings sat half-buried in dirt and leaves. Broken glass caught faint light. This place hadn't been used in years. I turned slowly, scanning all directions. Nothing. The silence was thick. I stepped through the clearing toward the trees on the opposite side. Halfway across, I heard movement again, this time to my right, just beyond the tree line. Not on the trail anymore, parallel to me. I didn't look directly at it. I forced myself to keep walking, even though every muscle in my body wanted to sprint. The forest closed in again. The ground dipped sharply, then leveled out. I checked my map again. Not good. I had gone farther off the main trail than I realized. The ridge I aimed for was now at an angle, not straight ahead. I adjusted course slowly, moving cross-country through trees. The footsteps followed, always just out of sight. Never closer than before, never farther. Time stretched. I stopped checking my watch because it made things worse. The sky darkened more, the clouds thick and low. I felt the first drops of rain hit my jacket. Light but steady. At some point I heard breathing, not my own. A steady, controlled sound that matched the footsteps when they moved. That was the worst part. Hearing proof of another person so close. I broke cover finally. I ran. Not blindly, but hard and fast, pushing through undergrowth, ignoring scratches, ignoring the pain in my legs. I aimed downhill, toward where the map showed a Forest Service road. The footsteps changed. Faster now, less careful. Branches snapped. Rocks shifted. I didn't look back. My lungs burned. My legs shook. I nearly fell twice. Rain soaked into my clothes, making everything heavier. Eventually, the trees thinned. Gravel appeared under my boots. I stumbled onto a wide dirt road and stopped, barely able to stand. I turned and watched the forest edge, rain dripping from my face. After several long seconds, I saw movement. A shape stood just inside the trees. Tall, still, watching. They didn't step closer. They didn't run. They just stood there. I stayed on the road, backing away slowly. After a while, the shape stepped back and vanished into the trees. I walked that road until I reached my car, soaked, shaking, exhausted. I locked the doors and sat there for a long time before driving away. Later, I checked reports online. I found nothing official. No warnings, no closures. But buried in comment threads and old forums, I read similar stories. Hikers followed, watched, never confronted, always alone. I don't hike unfamiliar trails by myself anymore, because whatever followed me that day didn't need to rush. It already had me right where it wanted me, and it only stopped because I reached a place it didn't want to leave the trees for. I chose that trail because it was marked as quiet. Not easy, not scenic in a postcard way, just quiet. The kind of trail people skipped because it had long stretches of dense forest and no big views until the very end. I had been hiking for years and I liked those trails more than the crowded ones. Fewer people, fewer distractions, more time alone with my thoughts. I arrived late in the morning. The parking area was nothing more than a wide dirt pull-off near a locked service gate. No bathrooms, no signs except a small wooden post with the trail name burned into it. There were no other cars. That didn't bother me. I actually took it as a good sign. I checked my pack one last time and started walking. The trail began wide and flat, old logging road packed hard by years of use. Tall trees on both sides, their branches meeting overhead in places, turning the path into a tunnel of shade. The air was cool and still. I could hear my boots, my breathing, and nothing else. No wind, no birds. That was the first thing that felt odd, but I brushed it off. Forests go quiet sometimes. After the first mile, the trail narrowed. Grass started growing down the center. The tire marks disappeared. Fallen leaves covered most of the ground, softening my footsteps. I took my time, stopping to drink water and stretch. Everything felt fine, normal, familiar. About 2 miles in, I noticed a faint smell. Not strong, just enough to register. Old smoke, maybe, or something damp and metallic. Couldn't place it. I assumed it came from decaying leaves or old burned scars. The forest had a way of mixing smells until they all blended together. The trail started to climb slowly. Nothing steep, but enough to feel in my legs. That's when I saw the first sign that someone else had been there recently. A crushed patch of leaves just off the trail, like someone had stepped aside and stood there for a moment. Fresh enough that the leaves were still bright where they'd been turned. I looked around, expecting to see another hiker ahead or behind me. There was no one. I told myself someone could have passed earlier and kept going. As I moved deeper into the forest, the light changed. Thick clouds rolled in, dulling everything into shades of gray and green. The air felt heavier, colder. I zipped my jacket up and kept walking, my pace steady. Then I heard something move behind me. It wasn't loud, just a soft crunch, like a boot pressing lightly into leaves. I stopped instantly. The sound stopped too. I stood there, listening, my heart slowing as nothing else followed. I took another step. Another crunch came from behind. I didn't turn around right away. My body reacted before my mind did. My shoulders tightened. My hands clenched into fists. I kept walking, slower now, counting my steps without meaning to. The sound stayed with me. Every time I stepped, it followed shortly after. Not exactly matching my pace, but close, careful, controlled. I turned my head slightly, just enough to look back through the trees. Nothing. The trail behind me curved gently, disappearing into shadow between thick trunks. No movement, no shapes out of place. I told myself it was my echo, or an animal keeping pace. I had been alone too long, thinking too much. That explanation worked for about 5 minutes. Then the sound got closer. I stopped again, this time turning fully around. The forest stood still. Leaves hung motionless. No wind, no animals, no footsteps. I stayed like that for a long time, longer than felt comfortable, before walking again. The following footsteps returned immediately. I didn't panic yet. Panic wastes energy. I focused on logic. This trail eventually looped near a ranger road. If someone was behind me, all I had to do was keep moving and stay alert. Turning around and confronting whoever it was felt like the worst option. The trail grew narrower and rougher. Fallen branches littered the ground. In one spot, a large tree had fallen across the path, forcing me to climb over it. As I did, I scraped my shin, sharp pain flaring. I cursed under my breath and moved on. On the other side of the log, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. Footprints. Clear ones. They were fresh, deep in the soft dirt where the trail dipped. Boots about the same size as mine. They stopped just before the fallen tree. On the other side, there were no prints yet. Whoever they belonged to had stopped there, waiting. I didn't know what to think. I stepped forward anyway, moving faster now. The thought that someone might be standing just out of sight, watching me climb over that log, made my skin crawl. The footsteps behind me resumed soon after, closer than before. My breathing grew louder despite my efforts to slow it. I didn't want whoever it was to hear how scared I was, even though that made no sense. Fear doesn't hide like that. I checked my map. The Ranger Road was still ahead, but it was farther than I realized. Another hour at least. Clouds thickened overhead. The forest dimmed further. The smell was back too, stronger now, mixed with something sour. Rotting food, maybe, or something worse. I didn't want to guess. At one point, the trail straightened, offering a long view ahead. I sped up, hoping to put distance between me and whoever was behind. That's when I heard branches breaking, not behind me, but to my left. Something was moving through the forest, parallel to the trail. I froze. The movement stopped. I didn't turn toward it. Couldn't. Every instinct told me that if I did, something would change for the worse. I walked again, faster now, adrenaline flooding my body. The movement returned, matching my pace, not trying to hide anymore. I broke into a run. The forest tore at my clothes. Branches slapped my arms. My pack bounced painfully against my shoulders. I didn't care. I just needed space, distance, safety. After several minutes, the trees opened suddenly, and I stumbled onto a gravel road. I nearly fell, my legs shaking badly. I turned and faced the tree line, chest heaving. Nothing came out. The forest stood silent again, like it had never moved. I backed onto the road slowly, scanning every gap between trees. I waited. My hands shook so badly I had to clench them together. Then I saw it. A figure stood just inside the trees, far enough that the shadows hid most details. Tall, still, watching. They didn't step forward. They didn't wave or signal. They just stood there. I stayed on the road for a long time, forcing myself to calm down. Eventually, the figure stepped backward and disappeared into the trees. I walked that road until my legs ached and my throat burned from dry air. When I reached my car, I locked the doors and sat inside until my breathing slowed. I drove straight home. Days later, I searched for information about that trail. Old reports came up buried in forums and warnings posted by hikers. Stories about being followed. About strange sightings near that stretch of forest. No attacks. No crimes reported. Just patterns of people being watched until they reached open ground. I don't hike alone anymore, especially not in quiet places like that, because whatever I encountered that day didn't rush me or chase me. It followed patiently, carefully, like it had all the time in the world.